It's a belief that they are either undeserving of their own achievements, or that they're not as good as the people around them.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Rich.
Hi, I'm Paul.
And the question is, what is imposter syndrome and how does it affect us? Are you thinking, why are we here?
I didn't know I was doing this one.
Why are we here?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm equipped to answer this question.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
Just before we dive into this in a lot of detail, is this a syndrome?
Well, that's a really... No, I don't think it is. I think a lot of people call it phenomenon. I call it syndrome because it's that word I can't say. Phenomenon.
Phenomenon.
Yeah. I can't say that word. So, yeah, I think it is a syndrome. Because why can't I say? This is the real imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah, I can't say phenomenon.
Yeah, phenomenon.
That's it. You can say it, see?
That's why it's not my favourite movie. Because I love the movie, but I can't talk about it.
John Travolta?
Yeah, where his brain expands and he knows everything. And he thinks he's been touched by aliens and it's actually a tumour. Yeah, great movie.
One of the people we admire a lot, Adam Grant.
Yes.
Great organisational psychologist. Yeah, one of mine. He says, which when I heard him talk about this, I thought it was really interesting because he calls it imposter thoughts.
Oh, interesting. I've not heard that, but yeah, I get that. Because it is. It's a dialogue. It's kind of a narrative where you're kind of imposing on yourself a set of beliefs and expectations that are out of kilter.
Yeah. And he sort of goes on to say, it's not a syndrome, it's not a disease, it's not something that's gripping you all the time, but it is, like you just said, these beliefs that you've developed and these things that will pop into your mind, maybe when you're at a bit of a low ebb, maybe when you're tired, maybe when something's not working, these thoughts pop in every now and then.
Well, the sort of research shows, the stats are 70% of people will experience imposter syndrome at some point in their working career, in their life. And there is kind of an argument as the other 30% enter politics and just don't know. I mean, it is that common.
Well, just build on that a bit then. So when we say imposter syndrome, imposter thoughts, what do we mean? What is it that's going on in your head?
So it's a belief that they are either undeserving of their own achievements, or that they're not as good as the people around them. So they're either looking at others and going, they're better at me than this, or So it's almost going, So like from our podcast, Rich, you're here because you're very talented. I'm here just because I'm making the numbers up.
Okay, yeah.
You're supposed to say no, you're not at that point.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Were we doing the podcast then? I thought you were. Right. No. But so it's like I'm looking over my shoulder then and going, I'm going to get found out here in a minute.
Yeah, a little bit.
So someone's going to...
I've heard some other descriptions of it, though, and kind of talking... If you look at it through an evolutionary psychology lens, which I thought was really interesting, and I really like this idea of going, it's part of our protective system to go, you're outside of your comfort zone, and this almost like alarm bell goes off in your head that says you've moved to a point where you don't quite know what you need to know to be able to do what you're doing. Yeah. And therefore you're there by luck, by chance, you shouldn't be there. And your brain is sort of secretly saying, just step back at this point, just go back to where you're comfortable. And you could see a point in human history where that would be really useful.
So this then actually is healthy. Might not be helpful all the time, but it's healthy. Because without that, then you might be exposing yourself to much more risk.
Yes.
Without that, you might be verging on being hubristic and thinking that you've got the Midas touch and you can do anything and becoming rather arrogant.
Like I said, 30% of politicians.
So this actually is
no one in mind. Just generally.
No. Let's not get into politics. So actually, this is a normal thing, then, isn't it? That we're bound to feel at some stage.
And it's like a lot of these things where you go, if you take that argument of going, the way we live today as a proportion of humanity's history is so obscure, it's so different to what we were designed to live like.
Yep.
A lot of these things make perfect sense. if you go back 5 or 10 generations, this makes perfect sense. If you're a farmer living in a village and suddenly you find yourself, in the big city, even though it would be tiny by today's standards, in a place you don't understand, dealing with people you don't understand, being asked to, count the taxes, why wouldn't you feel uncomfortable? Because actually there is a fairly strong chance that you're going to get caught out and, hung, drawn and quartered or something.
But this also starts to play into this belief that we might have about, am I enough?
Yes.
Am I enough? And also you mentioned there about comparing yourself to others, didn't you? So those comparisons that we make tend not to be fair either, do they, to ourselves?
No, but sometimes I get that, and I go, sometimes we are very hard on ourselves, and we take all the things, it's that actions intention thing. I can only go on what you do. I don't know what you're feeling, but I know what I'm feeling. So you turn up and just do a half decent job or whatever, and I go, Richard's turned up, he's really showed up, he's doing stuff. I turn up and focus on everything I got wrong that day.
I describe this as I know all my inner workings. I know all my inner doubts. I know all my feelings. I know all that. So if I do a good job at something and the outside world perceives I have, and they say, oh, you did a really good job there, I think, blimey, you don't know how hard I had to work to make that look that way. Whereas I might look at you and you, to my eye, you seem to do it effortlessly and easily. And I think, wow, I wish I was as good as that. Now, what I don't know is all the inner workings that you had going on.
Which is ironic, because I look at you and think exactly what you think about me, and exactly what you think about you, I think about me.
And that's the point.
And so often we're working together going, I'm so glad the other person's here because I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it works both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So therefore, the comparison that I give, if we come back to imposter thoughts, maybe that as Adam Grant calls them, is that we're not doing a fair comparison. Because if I look at another person, I'm doing it through my lens, I'm not seeing it through their lens. And that might not necessarily be helpful.
But, yes, I totally agree with that. And I want to kind of go up a level, because I go, but there are going to be times when genuinely what your brain is telling you in those imposter thoughts is you're not quite ready to be where you are. And this is why I think, again, you look at the research, 70% of us have it at some point in our life. But the percentage of people who have it consistently, if you look at high achievers, 25 to 30% consistently have imposter syndrome. Why is that? Because high achievers are people who step beyond what they can do consistently.
Yeah.
So they're constantly going outside their comfort zone into a place where they're not comfortable.
And that starts to become about drive and ambition and wanting to learn and develop and get better and achieve more.
So you kind of look at these people, some of the people we deal with, who I've got a few people in mind who I've coached around imposter syndrome. And you go, well, look, they come hand in hand, because you go, let's assume you didn't have it. Let's assume the opposite. Let's assume that you stepped into a new place full of confidence. Well, actually, that's hubris. That might even be a bit of Dunning-Kruger. That might be a bit of, idiots don't know they're stupid syndrome going on here, because you have no idea you don't know. And so for me, for a lot of particularly high achievers, imposter syndrome or imposter thoughts aren't a thought that says I don't deserve to be here. That's a misinterpretation. For me, they're a thought that says, right, I now need to switch into learning mode.
Yeah, I've got to up my game.
I've got to ask more questions.
I've got to get better. I've got to learn. Which in itself is, of course, very helpful.
And not that I want you to stop listening to this podcast right now, but after this podcast, go find the TED Talk. I think it's Mike Cannon-Brookes.
Yep.
Who is a self-made billionaire, who talks about this exact thing, about his entire life of stepping into the next place, feeling like he's about to get caught out. Someone's going to knock on the door and go, yeah, thanks, but you shouldn't have had a company, and you shouldn't be making money, and you shouldn't be doing these things, and you shouldn't be advising governments. And yet realizing that actually that's just a process of I've stepped into a new place, I've upped my game, I now need to go back into learning mode so this becomes comfortable again. But because of my drive, I have to acknowledge that the second this becomes comfortable again, I'm going to step into a new place.
Do something different. Okay, so let's build on that then. Let's talk a little bit about this concept, because I think it might be quite relatable, this.
Yeah.
For lots of people that listen to our podcast. Let's talk about this concept of Superwoman or Superman.
Well, okay, so in imposter syndrome, there is different types of imposter syndrome, and Superwoman, Superman is one of those types. So this one is about the idea that I take sort of all the bits of my identity.
Yeah.
You know? So let's take you, for instance, right?
Yep.
So I know some bits about your identity. You're a businessman,
Yeah.
but you're a coach and a facilitator.
Yeah.
And you're a father.
Yeah.
And you're a cricketer.
Was.
Yeah. And you're a Yorkshireman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these are really important bits of your identity, some slightly more important than others. Cricket's gone down a bit, but when we first met, cricket was hugely important to you.
Yeah.
Now, you take all those bits of your identity, you're going to look around at other people, right? But if you looked around at other people and went, yeah, but I'm not, Michael Vaughan in my cricket, and I'm not Richard Branson as a businessman, and I'm not, somebody else who's a great facilitator, and I'm away too much, so I'm not the best dad I could be. That's unfair because you can't possibly be amazing in every category. In every category of your life, there's going to be somebody who has decided, because it works for them, that's all I have.
So we see this quite a bit, don't we, in people that we work with?
Yeah.
And it's funny you pick on me there as well, because I feel this. Because
you do it. I see you do it.
Yeah, because you then go, it can create stress. It can create anxiety because you're trying to be Superman, Superwoman,
yes,
Superperson in all these different aspects and areas of your life, which is tremendously difficult because, as we've talked about in other podcasts, being perfect at everything or seeking perfectionism.
I was about to say, perfectionism comes in here.
It's very
hard.
hard.
So if you've got you pay this out, you've got really high standards, unachievable standards in every aspect of your life, comparing yourself to people who are dedicated just to that aspect, not the mix that you have. Yep. Without accepting, like you say, their understanding of the world, because they're probably sitting there going, I'm only being a dad and I'm screwing it up. And then we set these standards and then we go, I can't possibly live up to those. Someone's going to come and take the kids away, or someone's going to knock on the door and tell me I shouldn't run a business. Or
The Question Is from Thinking Focus, a podcast about how our thinking impacts our results and what we can do about it.
Slight aside though, do you think that the world we live in today, one where we're surrounded by comparisons through things like Instagram, Facebook, other social media platforms, television, whatever you want to be, where you are confronted with a lot of images or stories of perfect people that live a perfect life?
Yes.
And do you think that those nudges that we get from social media all the time cause us to then reflect consciously or subconsciously and go, well, I'm not that, therefore I'm not doing well enough?
Yeah, I always say the one thing in my life I am the most grateful for is not being a teenager right now in this age. Because, for a teenager to have to look at themselves and every single aspect of their life, from, the spot on the end of my nose through to how I did at school today.
To what I'm wearing.
And then be able to compare yourself with every single other human being on the planet instantly is mind-bogglingly
at a time when their brains are going crazy for peer pressure,
you go
from peers,
and you can see we're
that.
starting to see in the research. I saw some stuff this week from I think it was from Professor Mark Williams. I think he's at Oxford,
right?
Where he's gone actually smartphones in the hands of kids.
Yeah,
not good.
No, because that part of their brain is just overactive, isn't it, at that stage? And then we are seeing them trying to do that. But I think even though adult brains are more mature and more settled,
but even if you
still
go
see it though,
to adults and some of the business stuff we do, think about the narrative, just as everyday narrative in some of the customers we have. They're not talking about what it's like to be an everyday salesperson or an everyday finance person. They're telling stories of the one time the one person did the amazing thing. You look at a lot of the podcasts are out there. They're going and getting somebody who's done something exceptional and presenting it like this is just a normal story.
Yep.
And creating this kind of set of standards that make you feel small.
So hang on here though, because what a lot of these things do, if you look at some of the podcasts and things that are out there, books that we might read, right? What they kind of say is we need to help our young children. We need to within our own lives push ourselves, work hard, and if you do, you know what? The sky's the limit for anyone.
Some of them
we're
do.
not saying that's bad, are we?
No. Some of them do, but I still think there is a point where you go, you don't have to be exceptional at everything. You don't have to be amazing at all the things. and you don't have to know how to do everything before you start doing it. And I think that's not always the narrative that we tell ourselves.
Do you know what's interesting as well as listening to you talk is when you start to realise you don't have to be exceptional, at everything, and it changes that narrative and maybe as you get older and that peer pressure part of the brain that teenagers feel under tremendous, pressure to act on, is that you realise it's about doing the things that are important to you. It's about being good at the things that are important to you. You're running your race, that kind of thing.
I always go, I do a lot of work around personality, and I always say to people, everybody's going to have strengths and weaknesses. They're almost linked. Your strengths create your weaknesses, your weaknesses drive your strengths.
We always say it's the other side of the coin, isn't it?
Yeah. And if you're worried about your weaknesses all the time, if you're worried about what you're not good at, that's just where madness lies. What you've got to do is just go, where am I great and how do I play that game, and not worry about all the other games.
And what matters and what doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because we're all going to have weaknesses.
What's important to me?
That actually aren't that important in the grand scheme of things in terms of what I'm doing.
And accepting that, and I always use the story when I talk about imposter syndrome because I've suffered a little bit from this. Sometimes things become important to you. So like when I got on this journey of psychology, it became really important to me. And it was probably in all the things I've done in my life, it was the first time I kind of went, oh yeah, actually, this is a label I want. I really like this label.
So it resonated with you and
connected with it.
You like an awakening.
But I kind of felt less of an imposter as a psychologist at the start. Because, when I started this journey, I used to talk with people and I'd read more books and I'd studied more stuff and I was the best of the idiots.
But what you're going to say next, I know this, is you're going to say the more you learnt, the less you knew.
Yeah, exactly. But also, the better I got, the better the people I was liaising with.
Yeah,
and talking
so you're
with.
bound to have more imposter thoughts then.
Yeah, so by the time I'm doing a master's degree, I'm dealing with people who are absolute experts in each individual bit of this. And I'm going, how do I? And then you have to sort of realise, you go, well, hang on, they're experts in their individual bit. That's not my role. And if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to just do motivation theory, maybe I could. But do I really want to do that? I want to do a breadth of it and I want to apply it and I want to. So I can't. It's a bit like comparing yourself to the different parts of your life. I've got to go, what's my role in this? And how do I get good at that and not compare myself to, because there's always going to be somebody in each individual component.
Well, my dad always used to say, if you go back to cricket, and I used to play a lot of cricket, my dad would always say, there'll always be somebody that can do it better.
Yeah.
There'll always be somebody that'll have a better day than you. You just got to get used to that in life.
I think back to, I've just watched that Ed Sheeran documentary.
Yeah.
That he's done.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because I think he talks about in that where he says, I think he says something along the lines, I probably got this slightly wrong, so I don't want to do him an injustice and end up in court. I'm sure he doesn't want to do that. But he says something along the lines of, as a teenager, he kind of went, I knew I couldn't be the best guitarist, I knew I couldn't be the best singer, but I knew I could outwork most other people. So I just focused on that. And you go, that's a really emotionally intelligent attitude to that situation.
But again, that does start to play into some imposter syndrome or imposter thoughts, doesn't it? Because one of the things that we see is people saying, well, how do I prove myself? Well, I can just work harder than everyone else. And if I'm working harder than everyone else, that'll demonstrate that I'm good enough.
Yeah, possibly. But I think
probably just demonstrate it to me.
Yeah.
Am I working the hardest out of everyone?
And I guess it's all of these things is, when does that become an issue? Because there's a very fine line between that being motivational and driving you. So to a certain extent, that feeling I'm not quite good enough yet, that learning mode thing, as I call it, I don't see that as very negative, a negative at all. I think it's a hugely positive thing. If you can go into a situation and go, do you know what? I don't know enough in this situation. I am getting the little alarm bell.
I've got to learn.
I'm going to ask more questions. I'm going to study a bit harder. I'm going to research more.
I'm going to listen to people.
Yeah, I'm going to go into, I've done this with clients sometimes when they're talking about their business and we're agnostic to their business. But I suddenly go, hang on a minute. I just need to go into curious mode. I just need to get this first, because then I'm going to be better for them.
There is a thing here, though, as well, as we go a bit deeper, about who are you trying to prove this to? Why are you doing this?
Oh, well, that's easy for me. I'm trying to prove it to 15-year-old Paul. And the problem is I can never go and tell him I've succeeded.
I think you're also trying to prove it, as we've talked about this before, trying to prove it to 15-year-old Paul.
Yeah.
How old are you now? 21? 15-year-old Paul. I think you're also trying to prove it to your mum a bit, aren't you?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
But the question broadly, for people to think about is
it's therapy. All of a sudden.
But the question broadly is, why are you doing this? Who are you trying to prove it to? Are you proving it to yourself? Are you proving it to a lost loved one? Are you proving it to a parent? Are you trying to prove it to someone in a business? And that can be healthy and unhealthy at the same time, can't it?
And so I think, and I think of some of the people, we've worked with over the years, it's helping them recognise that, partly this is causing the drive and it's causing their success and it's causing all of their achievements.
And the worrying thing for some is that if it's proving it to yourself perhaps, or proving it to someone else, how will you ever know you've done enough? So will this ever go away? Does this mean that as you go through your career, you move into retirement, you're still trying to do things, you're still trying to prove things?
But to a certain extent, you go, and I'm going to be slightly controversial here, and go, and if you're doing it because you enjoy it and you're already happy, what's wrong with that? If you're doing it because you believe when I achieve the next thing, I will be happy.
Because there'll always be a next thing.
Right? Then that's a very different thing.
There'll always be another mountain.
There'll always be another mountain. And happiness does not come from the achievement of things. It comes from lots of other, there's another podcast. So if your imposter syndrome is causing almost neurosis, then I can see. And that's probably why people call it a syndrome, because where people have it really badly and it's debilitating.
Then it is driving them every day.
Yeah. But actually, I think for a lot of successful people we meet, there are going to be times when, if you're stepping forward, because it's that whole thing about a role of a leader is to go and do the bit no one else is doing, which probably means you don't have the skills for it and you're just willing to go, what the heck, I'll have a go.
But probably means you do sit at your desk or wherever in your car and think,
I have no idea what I'm doing.
I used to work for a boss who would say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man or woman is king.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing, isn't it?
And so for me, the sort of first part with sort of to getting over this feeling is to go, it's a normal feeling.
It's natural.
It's natural. It's normal. And by the way, most people I meet are going to recognise this, because you meet a lot of people who think I am the only person in the room who doesn't deserve to be here, and everybody else is going to be fine. And you go, no, you're all feeling like
it's
this.
Most people.
Yeah.
If you got one other tip for us to help with imposter syndrome or imposter thoughts, what might it be?
This is particularly aimed at people in sort of leadership positions, but I think it would apply to experts as well, which is recognising that just because you don't have the last 10% of the skills you need to achieve the thing you mean doesn't diminish the 90% that got you in the room in the first place. So you're in leaders. Just because you don't know how to lead on this project or this idea, or you don't know the answer to this business situation, doesn't mean you're a bad leader, because there's all this other stuff you're bringing to the table, and then you can go into learning mode and learn the last or work out the last bit. So it's kind of just, don't focus on the bit you can't do. Focus on all the other stuff you're bringing to the table and going, that's okay, I'll work the last bit out.
Next time on The Question Is.
Perfectionism is that kind of high standardness, flawlessness, everything has to be exactly as expected, accompanied by critical self-evaluations or the concern about how other people are grading you.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organisation, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.